So I came across this while I was on Reddit, and I wanted to talk about it because this is a really interesting conversation that needs to be had. And it's called "How Games Journalism Lost Its Soul." And I think I I have to say I'm really impressed. I'm impressed that somebody's actually willing to have this conversation. Honestly, yeah, I really am interested in this conversation being had because I think it's important. I think this is very important to have this discussion. So let's get it on. In the first decades of the 2000s, when the violent video game debate was at its height, games journalism aimed at an audience of avid gamers was at the forefront of exposing moral panics. Yes, we were fresh off of the Satanic Panic. We were like all in on this whole fight against Jack Thompson when he was trying to make this big statement about how, yeah, I think it was mainly how I think San Andreas or Grand Theft Auto was ruining children, despite the fact that the ESRB existed, despite the fact that there are actual laws that can cause companies like GameStop or Walmart to be fined if minors are just outright given copies of the game without a parental consent or a parent or guardian being there. Now, there are situations that happen where the parent or guardian will just outright buy the game for the kid just to shut them up, whatever. There's really not much you can do in that situation, mainly because the parent made the choice, and that's what the parent wants. Maybe the parent might not be informed, and I guess you could basically take the time out to inform the parent that, yeah, this is an M-rated game. There's violence and sexual situations in it. That might not be the best for that person, but the parent or guardian will make the final choice ultimately. So I remember Jack Thompson came back. They tried to, I know during the whole Anita situation, once she reared her head, they tried to pull Jack Thompson back out, and he made some bullshit argument. And I wasn't talking about how people shouldn't play Grand Theft Auto. It shouldn't be there for minors. I was like, well, duh. We're not fucking stupid, one. And two, it's like what I said before about parents or guardians. People are going to do what they're going to do regardless of whether you like the outcome of the situation or not. It's really ultimately up to the parents. Parents need to actually do a little bit more. They need to have more say in what they're doing, because that's their job. It's not my job to tell somebody how to parent their kids, and I wouldn't expect somebody to come in and try to tell me how to raise my child, because people aren't receptive to those things. I mean, you could throw out suggestions or ideas or whatever, but ultimately how the parent is going to want to have the last say, and not everybody is obviously made equally. Some parents are willing to have discussions with their kids about certain topics, like say if you're watching a scary movie with your kid. My daughter, she's 3 now, and she really likes horror movies, which is funny because that was kind of the course that I had when I was her age. I think it was 4 or 5. My parents took me with them to go see these R-rated horror movies back in the 80s. I mean, it wasn't even really a second thought for them. They went to the movies. We went to the mall every weekend for something, and we'd always wind up going out to the movies. And there were so many horror movies that, yeah, I suffered. I couldn't go to sleep, or I got scared out of my mind. But I went to go see City of the Living Dead, or we went to go see Mausoleum. I think Friday the 13th 3D. I remember seeing that because I remember the 3D glasses, and we went to my cousin's house right after that. There's just a whole bunch of other stuff. It was not necessarily the best way to deal with things, whatever. And I would say I'm more of the exception than the rule, because for all the stuff that happened or whatever, I feel like I turned out okay. I would imagine that I turned out okay. I'm not a psycho murderer or any of that shit that you know of. But but yeah, and she watched movies, or we watched the Video Dead, which was a kind of a horror comedy cult classic, and she was all right with that. And we watched The Nest after that. That's how our Valentine's Day went. So if you're wondering why there's no videos yesterday, or no videos on Monday, that's why. Valentine's Day, spending time with the loved ones, didn't really have time to do anything. But sorry. But yeah, it's ultimately up to the parents. I'm sorry, I kind of got off track there, but I figured an explanation would be pretty good for why there's no videos. It was long-winded, but hey. So anyways, in the first decades of the 2000s, when violent video game debate was at its height, games journalism aimed at an audience of avid gamers was at the forefront of exposing moral panics. This journalism, found in a range of outlets geared towards gaming, geek tech, and related audiences, aroused the critique that it was too defensive of its audience's beloved hobby. Which is funny, because that's the whole point of having a hobby, is to defend it against people who would try to destroy it. There is nothing wrong with video games. Video games do not cause violence. Video games do not cause you to actually commit violence. Any actions that you have are your own actions, and you should suffer the consequences of those actions. Should you do something so stupid as to harm someone or shoot up a school or any of those things, the consequences on you, the individual. We're not supposed to have these fucking sob stories about how somebody played fucking Doom and immediately decided to shoot up a school because of that. No, you did it. You deserve to basically reap the benefits of reap the consequences of such heinous actions. Cut, print. But anyways, yeah, people were basically saying that game journalists were too defensive of the audience's beloved hobby. But research data ultimately proved skepticism of harmful video game effects to be well warranted. Because, yeah, anytime somebody wants to try to make a case that, like, too much video games will cause you to shoot up schools or cause you to do stupid things, it's dumb. It's always these PTA types or these grifters or whatever that want to come in and try to tell you that, like, this thing, and it only matters. Keep in mind, these things only fucking matter once the hobby of choice is a multi-million-dollar industry, or multi-billion-dollar industry, as gaming is. Once gaming gets into the mainstream, that's when you start seeing all these creeps come out of the woodwork and try to basically make these statements or whatever. Same thing with, like, tabletop gaming. Same thing with music. Same thing with, like, everything else. Once it hits the mainstream, here comes the naysayers, or the cultural, the PTA, or the tipper gores, or all these other people. Anyways, curiously, even as mainstream media has improved its coverage of video games, specialized games journalism has actually got worse. Numerous articles have begun appearing insinuating that video games might indeed have nefarious impacts on players. Why has game journalism decided to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory, trading critical skepticism for virtue-laden, pearl-clutching, and unfalsifiable claims? Well, it's more beneficial to lean into the people making the arguments, one, and two. Instead of Jack Thompson, we have Jack Thompson with tits now. And now that women can't be ridiculed or criticized in any way, shape, or form, I don't necessarily believe that, but it seems like that's the mentality these days, or since 2014. a lot of these people who have skeletons in their closet will rally behind Jack Thompson with tits to try to make themselves look good in comparison to the supposed smelly gamer. Sometimes gamers can be smelly, depending, but not all of us. Some of us are actually like pretty decent people. We have day jobs. We have like lives of our own. We have families of our own. We're off trying to do the best we can with what we have, and we partake in this hobby to take our minds off of our problems, or just to relax after a long day of work. But a lot of the game journalists that have come by in recent times are just kind of like just not very, what's the word I'm saying? They're fucking sissies. So in the 2000s, the game journalist had, and there's actual webcomics that were covering this, where in the 2000s, the game you like is stupid. And we got into that whole snarky, it's cool to hate on the hobby that you're writing about thing in the 2000s, because everybody's a edgy dipshit. And then eventually it leaned into the I have to impress women that I'll never have sex with or touch. This game is sexist, and if you like it, then you too are a sexist. Yes, this man will never get a crumb of pussy, but will continually try, or actually commit sexual assault or anything else. But you have to remember, the game journalist that actually partakes in sexual assault was not manipulated by video games. He was a fucking creep in the first place. Anyways, the notion of video games contribute to mass shootings or other real-world acts of serious aggression is all but dead. Yes, but whether on violence or sexualization, or a slew of new games journalism articles have suggested that video games may have pernicious effects on players' attitudes and promote acceptance of violence, normalization of fascism, extremism, sexism, misogyny, or even rape. Now, whether the statements, I guess the best way to put it is, you could make these statements, you can make these claims if you want, but the onus of figuring out whether this information is true or not lies with the person making the accusation. Anybody that makes these arguments has to prove without a shadow of a fucking doubt that video games and anime and media actually causes these things. Because a lot of times people will make these subjective half-truths about like what they're gathering out of something, because they're really bad at, I don't know why they're so terrible at like actually figuring out themes, understanding like how messages work, any of this stuff. But the subjective nature of these things is somebody sees something and then they proceed to pull out what they believe that the themes are of the game or what it's about. But the problem with that is that if you're not capable of like actually being a critic, or understanding how culture works, or understanding how the game themes work, or just having a general idea of how to do your fucking job as a journalist or a gatherer of information for that fact, then you're going to be terrible at it. You're going to obviously go for the low-hanging fruit of half-clothed woman is bad and you should feel bad. That type of mentality. It's chilly down here. The formula for such pieces is typically to state up front that games don't cause X since data can't support a meaningful link between the games and negative outcomes, but rather that the games may influence how we think about X. And this seems like a dodge, which it does. Such statements essentially acknowledge that there is very little evidence for what follows, which tends to be reduced to a moral entrepreneurship narrative that nonetheless implies a vague causality. Yet, either the implied effects have themselves already been tested and falsified, or are put in terms that are simply unfalsifiable. Often the argument relies on clumsy references to cultivation theory or second order effects. Basically, it's bullshit theories and postmodernism bullshit and all this other stuff. They will lean heavy on these half-assed Marxist theories in order to push their you may be influenced by something without even knowing that you're being influenced. Well, no. If I'm being influenced by something, I'll eventually figure out myself whether I'm being influenced or not. But it is still my choice to figure out if I'm going to be influenced or not. Everybody's influenced by something. You can read a book and be influenced by that. But the influence that I'm referring to in that aspect is the book giving you new information and you trying to apply that new information in your life. Every piece of media you consume will kind of change you in a little way. And by that, I mean, like, maybe you'll learn something that you never learned before. Maybe you'll basically change your outlook on something, or have a little bit more insight into doing something that you didn't have before. That's fine. But I've read a lot of books as a kid. I've read a lot of books as an adult. I've played a lot of video games, whatever. And I've never been manipulated into doing anything like terrible. The only time I can say that I have been driven to anger is if the game was horribly balanced and just wasn't fair. And most of the time I just turn the damn thing off because I can't deal with it anymore. The hell with this. So, yeah. So let's go back. Such statements essentially acknowledge that there is little evidence for what follows. We already talked about that, which tends to be reduced to a moral entrepreneurship narrative that nonetheless implies a vague causality. Yet, either the implied effects have themselves already been tested and falsified, which happens more than you think, or are put in terms that are simply unfalsifiable. Yeah, they changed the wording in order to make it seem like this is true instead of actually doing their due diligence. Because how many articles have come out where they basically stated that, there's a clear link between video games and violence, only for a week later another article coming out completely disproving that first article. It happens a lot. It did happen a lot. It's because the wording was different, and then when somebody actually put the theories to the test, it found out that they crumbled under pressure. Often the argument relies on clumsy references to cultivation theory or second order effects, despite the fact that evidence for games having such effects is weak. For instance, regarding sexualized games, there are now more studies that haven't found evidence of such effects than those that have. Some studies even suggest that sexualized games may be associated with more positive attitudes towards women, perhaps because the game content tends to promote moral reflection, or watching. Actually, there's a point that was made, and I don't know if you've ever been to a strip club. I went for my bachelor party before I got married. Strip clubs are really interesting because depending on the type of strip club, be it male strippers or female strippers, you see an entirely different set of circumstances on display. The strip club I went to, guys are just kind of hanging there at the stage, and they'll put their money down or they'll put their money out, and it's almost like they treat women in a form of veneration. I think it was the Honey Badgers that kind of stated that when I used to watch a lot of Honey Badger radio back in the day, that female strip clubs often feel like it's you're paying some form of like reverence to the female form. Like it's almost treated like a church, whereas male strippers are just ravaged by these women who claim that they I had a conversation about this at work earlier, but women claim that they're so morally better. Not all women, but like some of the more vocal women, especially the ones that you would find on, say, Twitter or whatever, or basically virtue signaling. They'll claim that they are more morally righteous in the way that they depict sexual situations. But you get some women in a strip club and get a couple of drinks in them, they are like fucking animals. It's interesting. It's a fascinating study. Like, male strippers have like gone on to talk about how there was an article I was reading about male strippers like a couple years ago about how like he had to basically like keep them from trying to keep like older women that should know better, keep them from trying to like just grab his junk or reach into his pants and grab his junk. It's interesting. So when these so-called righteous women or righteous feminists get on people about playing games such as Bayonetta or games that they think it's highly sexualized women, it gives these men like incredibly wrong ideas about how women work. No, people just are really mystified by the way Bayonetta moves. They're mystified by the dancing and all the other stuff. It's like almost as if they treat Bayonetta as if she's like some sort of like weird oracle to like, basically the character is the guide to the game, because you're in this weird world where people are fighting giant angel things, and the only thing you can do is keep moving forward. You're wondering like more what exactly is going on here. Who is this Bayonetta character and what is her story? If you're playing the first Bayonetta game or the second Bayonetta game, is like, well, what's going to happen in this game? We know a little bit more about Bayonetta in her past in the first game. How does this play forward in the second game? And I think this is something that it's really funny too, because if we were to apply that to video games, how many shirtless pictures of Dante? How many women have like gone fucking gaga over shirtless Dante? My wife included. But my wife also believes that like she likes watching people play Bayonetta. She's one of those types of I wouldn't say strange. She actually enjoys games that display like things like that, whereas I found my cyborg figure. Like, she understands, she plays Devil May Cry and she really enjoys the characters and she enjoys Dante and whatever, but she also enjoys Bayonetta because she understands that that's kind of the alternate version of that for the fellas and for the ladies, and she has no problems with that. But you have these miserable people that don't want men to enjoy shit and want to basically ruin them for it. So it's just interesting. One deeply flawed Italian study from 2016 is often resurrected despite being thoroughly debunked. Games journalism is vast and heterogeneous, of course. I don't intend to paint with too broad a brush. Yet this turn towards moralistic overreach seems to have increased, particularly since 2013. See, told you. It was right around the time that our hooped earring messiah came on the scene, basically. And that's when you started to see this push towards leaning away from, not only like leaning away from the bald space marine, but replacing it with the bland fucking granola, tank top wearing, bow and arrow throwing, female dude bro equivalent. But diversity though, and I got a video coming about diversity. I don't want to throw any like surprises or secrets out, but I'm going to resurrect an old part of my blog that I wanted to talk about because I think this is important. I'm going to start playing around with vocabulary words. And when I say vocabulary, I mean we're going to have a deep dive into terms such as diversity and other words that have been kind of altered to mean something entirely different than what exists. I think it's time to start reclaiming some of those words. And I totally agree with the comments of some of the previous videos that were stating that, yeah, we need to reclaim these words. No, I'm not going to sit here and let them like alter my vocabulary. Fuck you. We're going to show you what real diversity is. We're going to show you what sexism is. We're going to show you what all these other things are. And I think it's that's going to be part of the evergreen content that's going to be going forward for this channel. But yeah, more on that later on in the week. So I don't intend to paint with too broad a brush yet. This turn towards moralistic overreach seems to have increased, particularly since 2013. There may be a few related factors influencing this trend. First, the Gamergate controversy undoubtedly hit game journalism hard. I agree. I thoroughly agree. Now, a lot of people will look at Gamergate as a thing that has tainted a lot of discourse on game journalism. I look at it the opposite way. Now, here's the thing with Gamergate. Game journalists and would-be activists and dyed-haired stinky people all thought that they were going to have an easy time taking over video games. But the fact of the matter was, the pushback on that was so great that it blackened the eye of all of these people collectively to where now they have to keep slamming back against it. Gamergate doesn't even exist as a movement anymore. All of the things that I tried to set out and do were accomplished back in 2014 when the Society for Professional Journalism had a discussion with some of the more notable members of the consumer revolt, and they hashed out a lot of their differences, and it came to actually the SPJ situation ended with them realizing a lot of the things that journalists did were in fact wrong. During the SPJ discussion, a lot of the things that journalists did when they were showing collusion and doing favors for people that they thought were being harassed, but really were just kind of dipping their toes in like all sorts of things and just being scummy individuals. The Society for Professional Journalism deemed them wrong, which obviously justified a lot of the people's actions for all the ops that happened in the 2014 period. Now, what happened after the SPJ? Obviously, it was almost like a New Game Plus with a whole bunch of random shit. And so a lot of that stuff was kind of like, whatever. But the initial run of what Gamergate did was very powerful. It proved that a lot of people can get together, gamers can get together and accomplish goals of like actually putting the fear of God into companies like Gawker and Kotaku and Polygon and all those other places. And that was an interesting time because for the most part, a lot of people that were involved in Gamergate, or a lot of people on the other side that were fighting against the ops, the gamers that were slighted by the whole Gamers Are Dead articles, the collusion, all the other crap, they never saw anything like this before. Most controversies that happened before Gamergate were basically a group of people got pissed off about something, new game came out, they ignored it and moved on to something else. In fact, I remember like slightly before that popped off, there was a particular person, the last name of Van Valkenburg, had stated that once Destiny comes out, they're not going to pay attention to anything that's going on. So it'll be whatever. It'll blow over. It didn't blow over. Because at that point, and I'll tell you why that is because at that point, you have a bunch of journalists basically trying to tell gamers that they were entitled messes of people or horrible for wanting certain things, and that the journalists themselves felt like they were influencers or manipulative people that wanted you to do what they wanted to do, which means you have to stop enjoying your bald space marine games, your sexist, misogynist stuff, your all this other stuff. They want you to stop doing that and start playing games like that they want to play, like Gone Home or the Indie Click of 2014. All those little shitty games that a lot of people are putting out. They wanted you to play those instead of playing the games that you were playing, your AAA games, your whatever. Oh, and it was even better when Indie Games the movie came out and you got to see Phil Fish kind of just flail around and have temper tantrums like a overgrown fucking child. But of course you were told that gamers need to grow up. You were told by Double Fine and Tim Schafer that minorities are to be made jokes of by sock puppets in the middle of fucking award shows. I still haven't fucking forget, or I haven't forgot a goddamn thing. But that's life in 2014. So first, the Gamergate controversy undoubtedly hit game journalism hard, though this perhaps not in a way intended. Gamergate began as a critique of games journalism, although a segment of the movement ultimately attacked women journalists, designers, and advocates with the worst venom of anonymous online communities. Ew. Well, there is more than that, but you go on believing that. I think the problem is, and a lot of it is, people are afraid to actually say what the whole thing was really about, which it was. You had game journalists basically being in relationships with the people that they wrote about, and they weren't disclosing that information. And that's probably one of the biggest things, whatever. Now, people will say, well, he didn't write about her, or he didn't give her positive coverage, he didn't review her game or anything like that. But yeah, Rock, Paper, Shotgun, Nathan Grayson did make a statement he actually covered Zoe Quinn. That's the beginning of it. No, that wasn't even the Gamergate controversy. That was a conspiracy. That was the thing preceding it. Now, the Gamergate controversy itself was mainly the Gamers Are Dead articles when that dropped. And that's what really fucked a lot of things up. Once the Gamers Are Dead articles came out and multiple articles were coming out on the same day, 8 journalist outlets saying the same things, that's when people are like, this doesn't sound right. That dog don't hunt. Like, why are there multiple journalistic outlets putting out the same article? Which is something that went on later on when what was it? Is it Clear Channel? Put out that news thing about news integrity thing, whatever, where all the newscasters were making the same statements on every channel. Like, it just shows you how deep the well goes on how most of these journalistic outlets follow a particular line of actions and just kind of march to the tune of whoever is playing the flute, basically. But anyways, in preparing for a recent talk on the sexualization of women characters in games, I decided to compile all the empirical academic studies of Gamergate. It turns out there are none. We don't know how many individuals who identify with Gamergate's journalistic critiques supported or were involved in the harassment of women. For that matter, we don't know how many individuals involved with Gamergate were women, nor their age, ethnicity, or actual identification of gamers. I can kind of tell you. I'm sure if you ask them or if you put out a statement or whatever, like, some of them will tell you. Oh God, it's interesting. It's let's continue. Let's continue. We don't know how many individuals involved with Gamergate were women, nor their age, ethnicity, or actual identification as gamers. Games journalism could have pushed for more empirical data, but instead too often became mired in the vitriolic debate surrounding the issues. Around the same time, some game journalists clumsily insinuated that the gamer identity itself might be dead. The olive branch offered by Kotaku's Luke Plunkett, if you call yourself a gamer and are a cool person, keep on being a cool person, seems insufficient given that Plunkett describes gamers in these terms. Not everyone who plays games or self-identifies as a gamer is the worst. Is being used in this case as shorthand, a catch-all term for a type of reactionary holdouts that feel so threatened by gaming's widening horizons. Plunkett recommends one article that equates the gamer identity with toxicity, hysterical fits, and hatred of women, claiming that the gamer as an identity feels like it's under assault, and so it should. Of course he would say that. The traditional gamer identity is now culturally irrelevant. A second article recommended by Plunkett refers to gamers as obtuse shit-slingers and these wailing hyper-consumers. That's a Leigh Alexander original. These childish internet arguers, adding to the disclaimer, but maybe some of you aren't so bad, does little to dispel the impression of disapproval. Claiming a thing beloved to some individuals is dead has been more of a time-honored trope since the first obituaries for rock and roll. Such headlines no doubt have clickbait potential, but are scarcely sophisticated analyses of gamer culture. The second issue is that games journalism often mirrors the polarization and tribalism that characterizes so much of the modern political landscape. Well, where do you think that came from? It started in 2014. A lot of people who are gamers that have been at this for longer than the person writing this article. They saw this start in games and eventually found that this is happening in a larger scale in politics. It's interesting. Game journalists and their audiences seem ever more divided on what types of content are appropriate for games, pushing some of the changes, such as more female characters in games, is worthwhile, but it can be tempting to move from reasonable requests to negative insinuations about people who enjoy other sorts of games. Interesting. In this sense, games journalism, like mainstream journalism, may have found more difficult to remain neutral amid the cultural and moral wars as to who is good and who is evil. You shouldn't even have to worry about who's good and who's evil. You should be worrying about actually recording information. My understanding of how journalism is, and this is from somebody who's a fucking blogger, my understanding of how journalism works is this. As a journalist, your job is to inform the public of what's going on, what exactly is the course of events that are going on, how it started, where it's going, and what could be the solution. Ultimately, the decision on what to do with that information lies on the person viewing or reading the media that you put out. But you are there to basically inform the public. The audience makes the final say, whether they believe that you're right and agree with you, or maybe they have other ideas or are willing to have a conversation about those things. Even then, the conversation had about what's being recorded and presented to the audience is a part of what exactly makes being a journalist interesting. Because now you are putting ideas out there and people are taking those ideas and actually having discussions, and maybe they'll come up with solutions. Maybe they'll come up with ideas. Maybe they'll come up with things that kind of improve the situation or whatever. And I think that's the problem with a lot of media and journalism in general. Instead of presenting the information and letting the audience do the I would say mental heavy lifting to come to the conclusions that they might find. It's let's tell you what to think, or let's manipulate the information to make you go along with what we want you to say. And that's a problem. That's not journalism. It's yellow journalism, but it's not proper journalism. Anyways, games journalists and their audiences seem ever more divided over what types of content are appropriate for games. Pushing for some changes, such as more female characters in games, is worthwhile, but it can be tempting to move from reasonable requests to negative insinuations about people who enjoy other sorts of games. Now, it's interesting that pushing for more female characters in games, I have to direct your attention to the state of female characters in games, because there's quite more in games than you think. And I think a lot of the problems that are going on is that people only push for more representation for females, minorities, whatever. They always push for a representation of that nature in the mainstream games, but they always ignore the fact that games actually do exist. More games exist outside of the mainstream spectrum that have those types of things. For every Metroid, there's like 100 or so games that have female main characters in them that people aren't willing to look at because they're not mainstream. They just want to be able to have the say so and become the tastemakers, is what it really comes down to. And that's a problem. Your job isn't to be tastemakers. Your job is to basically be informants, letting the public know about what's coming out, what's happening, maybe getting people to think about certain things or whatever, but ultimately it's not your fucking job. But like I said, blogger. So it can be tempting to move from reasonable requests to negative insinuations about people who enjoy other sorts of games. In this sense, games journalism, like mainstream journalism, may have found it more difficult to remain neutral amid the cultural and moral wars. I don't agree with. You can be neutral, but it's just not lucrative to be neutral. It's more. I guess it's easier to try to force people to go in a direction that's predetermined based off of your own personal ideas. I think the problem is people tend to, instead of report the news, they want to be the news. And that's the biggest issue that you're going to see with the situation. Screaming matches that seldom have to do with a nuanced view of data or efforts to find common ground. These changes in journalism may have been inevitable given the challenges facing journalism and modern society more broadly. Curiously, in this sense, games journalism may have fallen into a trap that media effect scholars have struggled with for decades. The temptation to make sweeping claims for effects that are difficult to substantiate with data. Just this year, we saw another study on violent games grossly exaggerating the evidence for negative effects when it actually found that self-reported surveys enjoyment of violent games predicts aggression a little better than a coin toss. Scholars have also cherry-picked data on sexualized games, highlighting the debunked 2016 Italian study, for example, and raising empirically problematic concepts like toxic masculinity. As the bullshit asymmetry factor notes, when scholars say extreme things in new media, this tends to get far more attention than subsequent debunking of those claims. Yeah, I can believe that. This is one reason the general public often continues to believe sciencey claims long after they've been scientifically discredited. Which, yeah, I can believe that. How far? Okay, not that far. Maybe it's unfair to expect game journalists to be critical evaluators of extraordinary claims when scholars appear to be so bad at it. Yet games journalism historically had done this hard work, contributing to a change in mainstream journalism's consideration of games, and arguably even aiding in reevaluations among scholars themselves for most of the history of games. Research, particularly on negative effects of the scholarly community, has ignored or dismissed the views of gamers. Game journalism helped push for more inclusion. It would be unfortunate to see that lost. I wouldn't say games journalism helped do that. Video games themselves have done more to push for inclusion, whatever. Video games were never limited to, and this is the thing that my channel started on, because I've done the beginning videos that I put out, or the first couple of videos I put out, were debunking this whole notion that video games were historically for boys, which I thought was fucking retarded. See the earlier videos where I'm going in on Adam Conover and just that whole notion about the state of the early days of video games with the NES. The NES was made for boys, or the NES was put in the boys' toy section, which was a load of bullshit. The NES was placed wherever people can get their hands on it, which some stores held it in special electronic sections, down to special Nintendo themed parts of stores that were created to lure people in to go purchase them, or they were just placed in wherever the stores could put things in. I've worked retail for 10 years now, so I understand how like SKUs work. I understand how mods work. I've worked on mods. I've done modulars for like big sales events and things like that. I've done that type of stuff. So I know what I'm talking about when I talk about these things. It's funny. It's like you never really think that working at Walmart for 10 years would give you an idea of how business works, whatever. But if you look hard enough, you'll kind of pick up some things that make sense. Some writers may feel that a critical evaluation of the medium raises the level of intellectual discourse about games, but if such criticism is divorced from the empirical realities of scientific data, it does more so to confuse than illuminate. I will go a bit further than that. It does more to... they're probably trying to scaremonger more than anything else, because scary things, or trying to make things... We're trying to illuminate things by making it sound worse than what it is. Basically, playing on the ignorance of the person viewing, or the person like reading or whatever, and making it sound like you're the oracle. You're the only one that has the information to illuminate the masses, whatever. It's an interesting business, and it keeps people coming back for more. That's why you see a bunch of these people like Don Lemon, like make all these grand things, whatever, or the Trevor Noahs of the world. God, I have words. But these are people that always think that they're the smartest people in the room and that they have the answer to everything. But if you scrutinize a lot of the things that these people say, you'll find that they're full of shit. There's always been bad examples of games journalism. There are still many excellent examples of games journalism today. However, a certain spark of critical thinking and skeptical inquiry has been flickering more weakly in recent years. This, whether due to overeager adoption of cultivation theory, humanities-based theories, or media criticism or moralistic claims, or simply a decay in critical thinking, means that game journalism sometimes seems to be losing its soul. Now, I'm going to actually... and we're going in for about an hour, so I do apologize, but I'm going to say this. If you guys, you game journalists out there, if you got your shit together and you actually were pushing for more critical thinking and actually allowing people to challenge you on certain things being said, there wouldn't be any need for YouTubers. I would tell you that right off the bat. The fact that you fucked up and you're slipping so hard is the reason why we are so popular right now. We're the other side of the coin. And we're doing it better than you because, fuck. We're actually allowing people to think. My whole premise of my channel is think for your fucking self. But I'm putting the breadcrumbs down. I don't have to do it. I just feel like I need to do it because I think this is, back in the day when I used to do my blog, it's important to have that counter voice. Because apparently at the time, nobody was providing a counter voice. Nobody was challenging any of the things that were said. We were supposed to just eat up the fact that certain game consoles are crap or whatever, like the Wii. Well, a system that was actually successful on multiple levels. We're supposed to listen to game journalists and believe that the console itself is crap because it doesn't do the same thing that the other consoles do. So yes, I start from that to covering some of the really goofy things that game journalists said in the past couple of years, to actually coming out and criticizing the acolytes of the hooped earringed one and asking questions and actually providing counter ideas using things such as game over, press start to continue, which was basically the Nintendo Bible to some. I read books. I actually like talking about the game journalist, or not the game journalism. I like talking about the history of games. I like talking about I like ideas and concepts. If something doesn't gel with it, I'm not going to be down with it. Anyways, breathe. Game journalism can find its way back by balancing the need to critically examine relevant issues such as harassment of women and girl gamers without making unfalsifiable claims about games' effects on players. Game journalists should rediscover the ability to critically evaluate the claims of advocacy groups, even those operating in good faith. Articles that mainly seem to highlight the social virtuousness of the author while critiquing game content or game culture may not be good game journalism. Or may not be good journalism. Reliance on cultivation theory or on the humanities more broadly is unlikely to produce empirically supportable claims about games. In short, get your bleeding heart out of here. It's you have to be a little bit more analytical, and you have to actually you have to follow the data. Nobody fucking cares that your heart goes out to somebody who claims to be abused or claims to be harassed by people just because they have a difference of opinion online. Oh my God, they're harassing me. Well, you probably shouldn't lie about something that you have no data to prove. Or maybe we should be a little bit more critical and scrutinize the things that you're saying. Maybe you're not being harassed. Maybe you're actually saying bullshit and we're calling you out on it. Maybe, just maybe journalists need to do their goddamn jobs and actually like learn how to see past that stuff and just put out both sides of the argument and let the audience decide themselves. Because the audience is a lot more intelligent than you give them credit for. In short, games journalists could use a bit more critical thinking about casual claims, even when these claims are convenient to otherwise reasonable advocacy goals. This would allow games journalism to highlight important social issues without sacrificing accuracy and integrity. Now, it's an interesting article. There's a couple things that I obviously added to it, but I mean, it's an interesting article. It does ask the question. I do want to know what exactly you guys think about it, because I think you guys will have an interesting outlook on it. But anyways, my voice is fading, and I was dumb enough to do this without my water. So I'm going to get out of here. Thank you for joining me for this, and I will see you next boss fight. Take care. Have a great rest of your day.